We resume from our session last time. Um, you were mentioning your work
About?
about your work
Yeah.
at Bhabha Atomic Research Center.
Okay. Yeah.
What were some of the main projects that you were associated with while you were there?
Well, the first couple of years, I was kind of getting educated in certain basic things. And in those days, we had to make practically everything ourselves. You want to operate a particular device. So first thing is you have to build up your own power supply. You have to build up your own gadgetry. You have to make your own rack. You have to make your own uh, boards for fixing of the electronic components and do all those jobs yourself personally, individually. Now, I think in a way it was a good training. For instance, it is for the first time I learned that in those days the racks, they had a certain panel length, which is standard. And the racks were also built with the iron angle, slotted iron angle, so that the whole pile of equipment could go in the rack properly, you see. So we started learning some of those elementary things about which we had absolutely no background in the beginning, you see. So from that angle, the first thing which I did was to make a power supply of certain voltage, certain power capacity, and two types, one for the walls and one for the filaments in the walls. In those days, we were using electronic devices walls, and we had to use the filament supply separately. So we started our work with that thing. In fact, everybody was kind of learning things. Even my supervisors, my elders, they were also kind of fumbling and trying to do things themselves. That was the state of conditions of art in India in those days. But the fact that we got initiated in that thing, it has made us do certain things in a certain scientific manner. And I think that was a good part of the training, you see. Now, that apart as a training, one of my most important projects as things developed was associated with the radiation counters. I was working that thing, radiation counters. Suppose you have got an alpha source and the alpha particles are coming. How do you count that thing? How many alpha particles are coming? What is the strength of the source and things like that? So one of the projects which I was associated with, or which I really developed right from the beginning, was what they call the plastic scintillators. Plastic scintillator. A flash of, uh, uh, a charged particle will, even a gamma particle also, will pass through the scintillator and give flashes of light. Then they were picked up by the photomultiplier, and the photomultiplier was connected with the counting devices and things like that. So my basic device was making these scintillators, and I enjoyed it. It was my first entry, so to say, into materials technology. And we started developing small things. In those days, even the plastic base which is required for these things had to be imported. The scintillation compounds had to be imported. It means that we have to wait at least for 6 months. You order those things, you process through the bureaucratic channels, and then place the order, it goes abroad, it comes then, and then you start using it. So from the moment of your conceiving a particular thing, it will take at least 6 months to get the things in your hand. But that could not be held. So we have to sort of plan things much in advance also, what exactly you should be doing in the meanwhile, you see. Now, suppose if you have made a mistake or you have not ordered proper things, then again time delay used to be there. So the conditions in those days not very favorable for quick research, you see. It was not that you could go to the market and pick up things and then start using that thing, you see. But we passed through that, anguishing period, the travel of time, and then worked out. See, for instance, I'll tell you one thing. Any time any new equipment would come to a laboratory, the first thing we would do is open it out and see in it how it works, and get the knowledge about the technology of making those things. So that is how the technology was gradually developed. But then in the course of time, later on, we developed many other interesting things. I started the plastic scintillators, and started growing number of crystals as counters, scintillation counters, anthracene, sodium iodide, many like that. And each one was a technology by itself in those days. So without any background, without any guidance, we had to fumble and work out our own things by trial and error and then come out with a solution. That was a good training and a good way of learning, a good way of progressing also. But at the same time, whatever we did in that process, they came to quality. They came to quality. For instance, the scintillation counters, plastic scintillators with which I was associated, they could perform as good as any in the foreign world. These were used by the physicists doing, for instance, uh, nuclear spectroscopy. So they would need these counters for studying the spectroscopic aspect of nuclear chemistry. So they used to use this thing and they profited from all those things. So the feedback was very positive and there was a good collaboration between the user and the developer and things like that. That was a very happy thing. Now it is in that process then for me an opportunity came to go abroad. I was in Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, radiation laboratory in Berkeley at that time, and I was there for a year and a half. It is there I started learning something about semiconductor devices. The idea was again a semiconductor device as a particle detector, germanium crystals as detectors of particles the same way. Then I processed on silicon crystals, silicon chips, making devices on that thing. And one of my best papers was what is called the double injection in a semiconductor. Means you have got a semiconductor which is absolutely pure. The purity level of 1 and 10 of 10 of that level, you see, purity. So on one side you are doping it with p-type material, on the other side you are doping it with n-type material, and you connect them and then apply to a power supply. So what will happen? On one side you are injecting electrons, from the other side you are injecting holes, and the space charge will be followed there, and the current will be varying in a very peculiar manner, and then you get a certain kind of a break there, you see. So I think that was a wonderful kind of device and very well appreciated in the field of technology in those days, you see. So that was my grounding, you see. I was in Berkeley in 1964 and 65, and I wrote 3 papers and then a kind of a review paper also. In fact, when I was in Berkeley, seeing our progress, seeing our devices, a person no less than famous William Shockley, the inventor of transistor, visited us in Berkeley Laboratory, and he spent a whole day with us learning how the devices are produced, how the devices are working. And then after he went away, he sent a letter of thanks and all that thing personally to me. I got his signature with me, Shockley's signature. Can you get that book there? From there? I will show that book. Shockley's original signature is there. Are you able to get the signature? This is the original signature. I must say that this book has changed, has given birth to a new civilization, and that is the contribution of the Bell Telephone Laboratory in Murray Hill, New Jersey. Shockley, Bardeen, and Breton, three physicists were working in Bell Telephone Laboratory, and it is their invention. Transistor is their invention. Of course, in the beginning, they worked on germanium as a semiconductor and produced the transistor, the counterpart of the triode, and that was the beginning of a new civilization, I would say. That was around 1947-48. Now, to explain the theory of semiconductors, the devices, Shockley wrote this book. Shockley was more on the theoretical side. Bardeen and Breton, they were on the materials side. They had produced germanium of a certain quality, and on the basis of that produced the transistor. Of course, germanium is a semiconductor which has to be operated at low temperature. So they had to cool it down. Still, they definitely managed to get the triode effect in the device, you see. That was a great achievement, you see. Now, in order to overcome this practical aspect of operating a device at very low temperature, they started investigating new types of semiconductors, and they found that the best thing is silicon. It can be operated at room temperature and all that, silicon. In fact, in group 4 of the periodic table, you have very favorable properties of the material or the element lending itself for making semiconductor devices, you see. So the devices were, in fact, that is how they started investigating. Later on, group 4 was identified, people wondering whether they could make a compound of group 3 and group 5 joined together as if effectively producing group 4 to get the semiconductor effect, and they succeeded in that. Now, it is that technology which has completely changed the entire civilization. If a new civilization is to be supposed to have come into existence, I will say it is with transistor. I will go one step backward also. The World War II was a great epoch-making event. From the pyre of World War II came up like a phoenix, new dazzling phoenix, a new world, a new civilization. And we can see immediately 1945 the war is over, 1945 you got transistor. The effect was so rapid, so powerful that within a couple of years, within a few years, by 1956, a transistor could be, silicon-based transistor could be used to produce devices so that you could do space projects. The first satellite which came out in 1956 could not have come out without the semiconductor devices. And from space project, then you can see now how everything has completely changed. So that is an epoch-making event. Those 10-15 years, I will say, absolutely wonderful. I can go even a little step further. 1956, the Sputnik came out, the Russian satellite first thing. And the moment the Americans saw that the Russians had gone to space, then they increased their pace of research in space, and then they overtook the Russians at that time, you see. Otherwise, you see, the Cold War was so severe, America was kind of threatened by that, and they rose to the occasion and introduced the whole new technology. Around 1957, 58, 59, again, this material science grew so rapidly that we had a laser. First glimpse of laser came in 1960, and you can see how things have changed again after that, you see. I will say in the material science, there has not been any parallel situation anywhere in the world at any time in the history of civilization during those periods. So it is the material science which has really given rise to a new technology, a new civilization. I will put it that way, you see. Now, it is because I was connected with the material science. When I came back again to India, I started growing crystals, and one of my projects was to grow silicon crystals, what is called by pulling rod. You have got molten silicon in a crucible, you take a small seed of a crystal, dip it in the molten silicon, just touch it here, and then slowly start lifting it up, so that the solid which gets clung, the liquid which gets clung to the solid becomes solid, and it acquires the quality of the crystal through which you are sitting it, and when you are lifting it up, the whole thing grows into a big crystal. Now, so that was my first experiment, and I was successful doing that thing in Baba Atomic Center, you see.
That's a monocrystalline.
Pardon?
Monocrystal.
Monocrystal, of course, monocrystal, you see. And that is the one which is used for devices, semiconductor devices, silicon diode, silicon triode, all those things. My idea was to use that thing as a detector. Silicon diode, PN junction as a detector. PN junction, what happens is, when you have got a PN junction, then in between there is a region, what is called the intrinsic region. Now, if a particle passes through that region, then it will produce ion-electron pairs. You collect them and you detect the thing as a signal of the passing of the particle through that thing, you see. So that is how the PN junction was used as a detector, and I was associated with that. I produced those crystals, I had used devices, those things. So that was a joy also in a certain sense to get those things done. And it was for the first time in India that a crystal of that kind was produced in Baba Atomic Research Center. So my field was in the solid state physics in that area, and whatever. Now there is a full big section in Baba Atomic Research Center dealing with crystal research, production of variety of crystals from liquid, from solutions, from melts, like that, you see. So that is how the technology gradually developed in India. It is absolutely indigenous technology. We had to fumble and get things done by ourselves, you see, like that, you see. At one time, I also produced a ruby crystal, silicon dioxide doped with chromium. That is what ruby is. Huge, big, nice, red colored crystal like that, you see. And that ruby crystal is used for laser, like that. So, the materials technology, investigation on that was quite an interesting thing. I mentioned a little while ago that if you combine group 3 and group 5 element, you get a compound which behaves like a semiconductor of class of group 4. One of the most favorite things is arsenic salide. Now, selenium arsenide. So it is that device we have produced, and we have used that thing for what is called the Hall effect. You see, suppose you want to measure the magnetic field. How do you measure the magnetic field? It is that device which is used. So like that, it went on like that for some time. So materials technology, based on that, the devices, that was our main occupation, in the earlier stages of this thing. Later on, my things got slightly drifted from this part. See, I became kind of senior. I had group responsibilities. I had to look after many other juniors and things like that, and they would ask for. So it became more and more sort of administrative job, you say, administrative job. But that helped me also in a certain sense. Later on, with that group building up, I was heading a division with about 300 staff members of various grades, starting from technicians and workshop people and scientists and people like that. I was heading a big division like that. And it is that division which has produced large number of devices, large number of equipment, large number of components like that. One of the responsibilities then with which I was getting connected was to engage our activities with Space Department. And for the purposes of space purposes, they wanted certain kind of environmental conditions to test all their equipment, gadgetry for outer space equipment. A vacuum chamber which is simulated all the space conditions in which the devices could be tested. That is how we made a particular equipment there. And then the first Indian satellite, Aryabhata, was completely tested. I was present there when the testing was going on in Bangalore, and then it was flown out. When this technology became successful, other people also got attracted with that. One of the projects which we had was with Indian Institute of Astrophysics in Bangalore. Indian Institute of Astrophysics, they were planning a huge big reflector telescope, and that telescope had to be coated with aluminum as a reflector, you see. So we made the whole device to do the coating of a mirror with these purposes. So I used to go to Bangalore and visit the laboratories and be associated with them and then get connected with all that thing. So that was one of the major projects with which I was. But then ultimately my basic interest was, all right, you have made all these gadgets, you have helped, you have developed all those things. Ultimately my thing was there, I am more interested in materials, not in the applications and use here and there and all that thing. In the material, how can new material be invented? See, even now, one of my desires will be to produce a water molecule with different properties. Our chemistry teaches us that you have got water molecule, oxygen is standing there on one leg, at the other end is hydrogen, at the other leg is another hydrogen element, atom, and between these two legs, the angle which is there in the water is 104 degrees the same, and it is that which gives rise to all the properties water is possessing. I would like to ask a question to myself. Can I make water molecule with an angle different than 104? Why not 108? Why not 112? And if I can do that, I will get new properties of water. Properties of water will not be the same as what you have got now. If new properties of water could be that way produced in a laboratory, then the entire biological system, the entire environment in which we live, the kind of life which is there around, that will going to change, undergo a change completely, because it will have different qualities, different properties and all that thing. Why can't I produce water with a different angle between the OH limbs? Why can't I? What is it that ties water to a given angle, you see? There must be some law, some governing principle, and I should be able to master that thing. So if I had to really do research, I would like to see, produce those things which will bring out a new type of life, new type of organization of the material world, a new type of organization based on this material world of the life world, because life world will change. The fish will be of a different quality, man will be of a different quality, the tree will be different quality, flowers will be of a different quality altogether. If I can bring out that kind of a change, little change. So that is the sort of a thing which I hold as a kind of an ambition. Whether it will happen or not, it is not going to happen in my life at the moment, I know that thing. But I am pretty sure that that is the kind of my soul's desire, soul's wish, which will be carried from here to the next life. Absolutely sure about that thing. And maybe in the next life I will be able to pursue that thing. So the development of material science from that angle is something very fascinating. It changes the entire base of your existence completely. You are a new man, you are a new civilization, new species, you don't know what. See, you don't know what. Maybe tomorrow you would not need telephone, you not need aeroplanes to go from here to, say, New York. You will be able to translate yourself from one place to the other completely. You get dematerialized from here and materialized at the other end completely. Why not? If your materials technology has now completely developed in that manner, that possibility does open out. And I think it is towards that the entire evolutionary movement, knowingly or unknowingly, consciously or unconsciously, by its own drive and by its own thrust, getting forward, moving forward, you see. It is going to happen. It has to happen. It's a question of time, it's a question of future, it's a question of dynamics of things. But I think there is a kind of a hidden force in nature which is pushing all of us in a certain direction. And it is that direction which is most important, most valuable, you see. So that is the kind of a research I would like to do tomorrow.